Greetings, dear ones. I'm Kryon of Magnetic Service. We are still in Dharamshala. This particular channeling will be slightly different. It's not about information as much as celebration. You're in the area where oneness is taught. And I want to review it. Each one of you listening to my voice is included. There are no exclusions. Ever. All human beings are included. Dear ones, the shift of this planet since 2012 has enabled human beings to start on a path that is new. And all that you have been listening to from me on the 10 channelings so far come to a point right now where I have to say, take a breath. Because the energy that is here since the precession of the equinoxes on this planet starts to change everything. And the model for the change is what is taught here. The basics of the teaching, not the periphery. The basics of the teaching say that inside you there is actually a piece of the creative source. And in the West, it is called the higher self. And in the West, there have been all manner of processes to connect to it. But while the West has been considering processes here, there are none. Instead, there is the consciousness. That is the process. And since this change, dear ones, of the precession of the equinoxes in 2012, the consciousness of all of you is starting to be what I will call enabled. You can sit and you can study what happened here. You can listen to the teachings. You can relate to all of these things. Well, this is who you are. If you're listening to this channel, the chances are that you are interested in the consciousness of yourself, of the power that it might have. And suddenly, after 2012, the ability of the individual to hook the oneness of all things to itself has never been as great. This is a plea. Instead of you simply looking around and judging for yourself what took place or what did not take place here, take a moment and throw that away and look only at the area that promotes what you believe. And relax inside yourself that you are powerful because of the consciousness that you have. Since 2012, many of the teachings of achieving the oneness are starting to be modified. And the reason is because this is the time when humans are going to start to increase what you would call the evolution of the oneness. The concepts that you have heard about compassion and oneness, specifically from the academic who was asked, how can you forgive those who would kill the ones around you? How do you even begin to look at them in a compassionate way? And the answer he gave was complex. And the answer that he gave was all that he could give in a linear way to describe a non-linear consciousness process that is that which is the compassion of God. And to explain the compassion of God is almost impossible. And yet he did it. And what I am telling you is that these explanations are going to start occurring naturally to you. You're going to start understanding how a compassionate soul works. And you're going to do it without the study, without the years that it might take. And the reasoning is this: the ancients of this planet all foretold this time. All over the world, they foretold of a time when the evolution of consciousness would begin. It is no accident that my partner kept me from coming here until after the shift. For now I am in the center of the consciousness of oneness study, and this is the time and the place to present this premise, a plea for you to understand that these things are self-evident, and they are starting to become part of you, not a study. And the more that you would examine them, the more you would take on the ownership of the knowledge of a compassionate spirit, of what compassionate action really means. You've seen so much. You've met the masters. You've met the children. Can you then go the extra step and meet yourself? Can you look upon yourself the same way you did the children? And that is to say, you're precious, magnificent in the eyes of spirit in every single way. And if you can, you start to understand that these things are being almost an invitation to you to go to the next step. Before you would leave this beautiful country, or the areas, or even the next ones you will visit, take an opportunity, dear ones in front of me, to sit for just a moment and ask yourself, is there something more I didn't get? You're in the right place at the right time. We speak so many times of the oneness between the human being and the creative source which you call God. And now human beings are able to put this together faster than ever. And the reason there is a plea, dear ones, is this: as you go, the world goes. The enlightened human being is not just one. The explosion that can happen in you is able to be carried back wherever you are. And it doesn't matter whether you're a teacher or not. For you carry it back and others see it in you. Your children see it in you. Your grandchildren see it in you. And this changes the world. Take a moment and say to yourself, is there more? For there is. And it's so profoundly here. Namaste. And so it is. Greetings, dear ones. I'm Kryon of Magnetic Service. We just ask for a moment of silence, and it's very telling. It's all silent in linearity, but not really. For before me there is a living mandala, made with living flowers just a moment ago. It's beautiful. And it took about 30 minutes to make it, with more than 20 people, each taking a turn with gathered flowers from the area and building it in a random way, creating a pattern that is unique, that will never be created again. Each flower was placed with a prayer, and at the end there are many prayers. But what's interesting is it is in a circle, and the circle has always represented the oneness of all. Many prayers pointing to the one source. In addition, this mandala, in many circles, is said to be sacred in its creation and in its impermanence. That means it's going to be collected in a way, and the flowers will be distributed, and the pattern will be destroyed. And in whatever way it's distributed, in water or air or even fire, it goes away. Now the teaching is one thing here. I'm going to give you something else. The story of why these things should be impermanent. In fact, why all of your lives, day to day, should be impermanent. Now stand by for a linear teaching. It isn't necessarily what you hear here. If you create something that is beautiful today, human beings tend to work upon that and build upon that because it's the most precious thing they ever did. And so the permanence of something that occurs to you, even if it's the most sacred thing you can imagine, even if it's an explosion of enlightenment, humans tend to build upon it. They will create perhaps an altar that will simulate that which they have envisioned, that exploded into enlightenment for them. They build upon it and build upon it. And you would say, well, of course they do. It's precious and it's beautiful in every way. Why not? So let me give you a puzzle. Let's say tomorrow you have another explosion of enlightenment that goes to a level you had no idea existed. Are you going to then throw that away because you've already built an altar from the older enlightened thing? And the answer is this: worldwide, that's what's done. Once you experience something, once you are given perhaps a doctrine, or the way of God, or the way of oneness, you listen to those who are wise, and you practice what they say, and you build upon it. And if something comes along that is of a higher level, so many are not willing to see it. They will say, well, it's not what I was told. Dear ones, if you continue to live day by day in impermanence, that will never happen. And so this is the choice of all humanity, but especially here and with you. Whatever you learn today does not then dictate tomorrow, because tomorrow can be grander and greater than today. So creation can happen every single moment. Stand by, literally, wait for it. For tomorrow will let you see things you never saw today. So be impermanent with these things. And do not hook into one thing that then ties you in to the way things work and keeps you from greater things. I want to talk about the area we're in Leh. The altitude here is significant. My partner has taken me to other places that are significant with altitude, such as Lake Titicaca, home of the highest lake on earth, and it's similar in the way it feels and the way you would react to it as a human being needing oxygen and trying to acclimate to this, the thinner air. I want to tell you something that maybe you didn't understand or know. There's some things here that are very unusual. We're in the Himalayas. And as you know, the Himalayas will continue to get higher and higher as you approach the highest one, which of course is Mount Everest, the highest mountain in the world at the moment. So I would like to tell you something. What do you think it would be if you added another 1,500 meters to where you are? Let's talk about those who live there, who perhaps live at 6,000 meters or 5,500. What do you think that would be like? Well, I'll tell you. For those who live there and were born there, and there's not that many of them, and some of those called the Sherpas, the ones who lead the guides, the ones who are the guides, the ones who train the guides, it's an interesting situation. How healthy are they? How healthy are they? Well, number one, they are not vegetarians. So you'd say, well, they're probably not quite as healthy as the others who live in India, who are vegetarians. And here's a fact, that in their society is one of the highest rates of those who are living over 100 years. Did you know that? It's very common with them and some others who live at those altitudes in other places of the earth. Why should a thin air create an attribute of long life? Scientists have studied it. They don't fully understand it because a human needs a certain amount of air. And if it's extremely thin, other humans cannot stay there without oxygen. Here is an answer. If you're acclimated from birth to a very thin air, then through a lifetime, a body does not have to function as much as if you had thicker air. Do you see the sense of this? And so long life is a given because the body has never had to work very hard to breathe. It's as simple as that. Now I mention this because now we speak again of the magic of Gaia. You are starting to be in Gaia. The air is clear here. You're looking at the mountaintops. You see the snow. You feel the fact that you are high with every breath. Gaia delivered long life to those who live in the mountains. You realize that Gaia delivers life itself to you? Are you aware that every breath of thick or thin air had to emanate from a plant? Gaia feeds you, lets you breathe. The magic of photosynthesis is a partnering with you and the planet. And that's just one area. We have given these kinds of things to you before, but now you're going to walk in it. You're going to see some of the things that were built that are high. There is some kind of a sacredness as you get in high places. Have you noticed? And the places that my partner has been taken to that are the highest are some of the most sacred in the planet. And now here we are in India, in a very sacred place that is again high. So there is this feeling among human beings that if they can place those things which are temples or houses of importance or learning centers in very high places, they're going to have the advantage somehow of even higher essence and energy from Gaia. Is this a perception or is it true? Well, dear ones, it happens all over the planet. It's true. For as you raise the altitudes and you start to feel the thin air, there's this feeling of sacredness that comes over you, an enhancement to connect to the oneness. Even though you may think it's harder to breathe, there is an attribute here that your body recognizes, and it's easier to connect. And this is why you'll find these things here, and then of course in the magic of Tibet, where it's very high indeed. I want you in these next days to look upon Gaia a little different than you have before. We'll continue the theme that it is the life's partner of all humanity. But in this journey, in this place, you get to feel it. Is Gaia real to you? Or is it just a place you live? Is it your partner that is spiritual? Or is it just a place to live? Have you ever considered that part of oneness is the connection to everything Gaia is? Now, dear Westerner who's listening to this is new to you. But here it's not. Gaia is included, the animals are included, the air is included. The oneness is with all. It's not just humans. That is one of the biggest secrets of oneness. You cannot make it exclusive. So think on these things as you look at the mountains. And as you climb some stairs, it may make you breathe a little harder, knowing that everything is perfect in divine order, and you'll remember these times for a long time. And so it is. Greetings, dear ones. I'm Kryon of Magnetic Service. We are still in this beautiful Himalayan area and enjoying every bit of it. The air is clear, the mountains are beautiful, and the people are as well. The spirit of oneness and compassion is what they teach. And this soothes the soul in ways that sometimes cannot be done. Dear one, it's one thing to teach this and another to see it. This brief message, I want to be profound. They say that the Buddha himself made a statement that life is actually a dream. Now, I have said the same thing in other ways, for it's true. What it means is this, is that what you see around you exists only because you created it. That every single human being has potentials, and that the dream that the Buddha talks about is a disconnection from anything that is real. And the teaching is this: the dear human being, from the moment you arrive on the planet with a human body, Everything else is created with consciousness. Some of you will say, well, consciousness doesn't happen that is able to be a creative one until you're older. But you are existing in a consciousness that others have already created. So actually, that is their construct that you arrive in. What if we told you that anything is possible, but that you have set up the actual reality you believe exists on this planet? And most of it is only a portion of what is there. We have said from the beginning that you have the ability to create your own reality. And so where do you wish to start, dear ones? Where are you? What reality have you created for yourself? And what are the rules? And if you want to make a list, the rules are this. You might say, the human will write them. What am I afraid of? How long am I supposed to live? What is it that I might catch in a disease? Why do I feel so unworthy? And the list goes on and on. And every single point on the list is something that you have created for yourself. Every single point. And the biggest one, who is God? Where is God? Instead of an empty space or a blank board with a piece of chalk, you see a board that is filled with inappropriate things that you built yourself. All of it. The differences between people, the anger, the disappointment. You built it. You put it there. And then you serve it. How long are you supposed to live? Well, you'll say, look around. There's an average. People die at a certain time. That's how long a body lasts. Which is totally incorrect. It's only that you look around and see others' constructs. And they're living it. You might say they even worship it. And at a certain age, they say they're old. And their body hears, you're old. Things start to shut down because that's what's expected. The truth, consciousness, can keep you young, way beyond any average of a construct that others have created. You were born into a construct of spirituality, usually given to you by your parents. Because you're here listening to this, you've gone beyond that. But think about it for a moment. They told you who God is, where God is, and whether it was a God of enlightenment or punishment. And so many children never look back. And that becomes the thing they worship in all its dysfunction for the rest of their lives. And they teach their children the same thing. What is not taught is the fact that you can be or do anything. Even in cultures, if you're born poor, consciousness will raise above the environment. And there's been so much proof of this. A seeker, one who is an old soul, who is born into a planetary place where they are poor, will rise above it because they will see how. And they will stick out among the rest. And they will show others what is possible, how it can be done. Because an old soul eventually is an ascended master. Is life a dream? Life is instead a blank sheet of paper. You arrive in someone else's construct. Draw a little hole, if you wish. That's when you arrived. And then when you have a consciousness of your own, you can draw anything you want. And the environment doesn't matter. The country doesn't matter. Consciousness will always rise above situations. And you have seen it over and over in some of the best success stories of a high consciousness individual. Compassion remains the key. Compassion for yourself. Compassion for yourself. And that means you are worthy to be here and look at everyone and see the God inside. But you have to see the God inside you first. That is consciousness. So you have to erase that from your list. You're not worthy. In fact, erase everything from the list. Don't make a list. Just be. Be there with your piece of chalk or your pencil and draw in that which is you. Draw a long life, no disease. Draw health for those around you. Draw a compassionate God that others can see in you when they look at you. Draw joy because you're happy with life. That is the teaching that we give here. And it's not that different than the teaching that is given here by thousands. This planet is graduating. And what they're not necessarily aware of here is that the prayers that they give daily for compassion and peace on earth and for health for all humanity has more power than it ever has. India is more powerful than it ever has been before. You'll see. Dear ones, we've told you before, there's a great deal of negativity in this planet. Look to the stars and the horoscope, and it will yell it to you. And that's because the darkness knows it's in trouble, and the darkness is losing. And the result is it's making a lot of noise, creating scenarios of great fear, even the fear of another war, in hopes that you will give up and return to the old days where the darkness was in charge and that light had an uphill battle. Mark my words this day, that light has the upper hand and darkness is fighting the battle. But their methods often work. If they can get you to fear, then they take away your enlightenment and the light in you and all that you have. And that's when you'll take your list back and expect to die in a world without hope. Dear ones, this world has a great deal of hope. A lot of hope. Think of these things. And so it is. Greetings, dear ones. I'm Kryon of Magnetic Service. It is the first channeling from Nepal. We are at the end of a day, and it's time for a message. It's a basic, classic Kryon message, given before in certain ways, not exactly like this. It talks about the oneness of all things. It's a practical channel. There's no puzzles here, not really. But I want to do something I love to do. I want to give you the scope of who you are and what has happened on the planet, and the beauty and the evidence of God all around you. I have told you before that the creative source of all that is what you call God. Whatever name you have for the central source, God, Spirit, there's one. And this source did not simply create you. You created you. Because you are part of the source. If you have no body, and you didn't in the beginning, you were still you. We've talked about this. What a soul must look like to you. Because you're a human being, you singularize all things. You make it one. One soul, one name, one body. Imagine for a moment you had no body, but you're part of the creative source. Think of it as a soup of creation with trillions and trillions of what you call souls lumped together in a non-linear way. Pure love. Consider for a moment you always were and always will be. In other words, there was no beginning of God. Now, a human has a difficult time with that. For everything the human sees is linear. There's a start, there's a middle, and there's a finish. But not with God. And if you are part of God, that means you had no beginning. Slowly, the multiverses were made, including your own. Slowly, the galaxy you are in was made. Slowly, the stars became cooler. The planets spun off in their ways, including the Earth. We told you that in your history, you used to have another star. It didn't go somewhere else. It's not in some strange orbit. It left, not to return. You should know this. Most life in your galaxy has binaural star systems. That really promotes life the fastest. You can see why. The sun is the life giver. In the physics of your planet, two of them does a better job. That's why you are well hidden. Because those who look for life look for the binary systems first, and the ones with one sun last. Slowly the earth cooled and it formed. We've told you this before. You were watching. In this galaxy, other planets cooled before yours. There was life beginning, and you watched it. The earth had 5 starts of life, while the other planets started immediately. Millions of years before humans ever got to this planet, in the evolution of life here, there were civilizations. The earth was late by design, and many of you watched it. This is who you are. Without a body, with only the essence of love and a soul mixed into the creative source and the beauty of the oneness of all things. This is who you are. And then the human started to form. And after the amount of time that it took for humans to be like you were given the knowledge of light and dark. And you were given it by other star seeds who had civilizations millions of years before yours. They gave you a piece and a part of their biology. It lives in your DNA for you to speak of and listen to those who have observed it. The 23 chromosomes says it all, instead of the 24 that all others around you have who are like you. It really began there. That's the creation story. And then and only then did you form a soul with a body. And it was new. And now you began. And you started living lifetimes after lifetime. Now, I want to back up and ask you some questions. When the universe and the galaxy was still hot and hadn't cooled yet, what were the rules of God? The answer is there aren't any. There's no structure. There's no linearity. There's only the oneness of the love of the creative source, imbued upon all things in a beautiful way that goes beyond understanding of any brain anywhere. When the galaxies started to be formed and the planets started to be formed, where were the rules of God? There were none. God is the essence of all things, is beautiful beyond belief, non-linear, and only love. When the earth was cool enough for life to start and stop and start and stop and finally receive photosynthesis, where were the rules? Where were the rules of God? And there were none. When humans formed, and over a long period of time they became like you. When the star seed was put here, when you received the knowledge of light and dark, where were the rules? There were none. Human beings were given free choice to see themselves and the oneness or not. That was a fair thing, so that human beings could populate this planet and with free choice decide where the planet was going to go and change the vibration of the planet and the galaxy in the process. Question: where were the rules of God? There were none. Just like in the creation, there were none. But because human beings have a linear focus, they began to see things. And the only model they had to explain the things were themselves. It's interesting, is it not? At the first, they saw God, but they thought it was many of them. In the most primitive ways, they assigned God to the stars or the sun or the moon or the earth. And slowly, over the evolution of spiritual things, not too long ago, the earth agreed there is only one God. One. The oneness of all things, the oneness of God was here. Beautiful. What were the rules of God? Dear ones, there still were none, but there were the rules of men and God. And slowly, because you only had one model yourselves, You built the structures and the constructs of how to worship the one God. And there were so many rules. And dear ones, none of them were the rules of God. All of them were the rules of humans in their attempt to find God. And slowly the rules became many. And because humans are humans, many times the rules became exclusionary. The one God had only one way to be worshipped, and the rules were clear, some said. Others said, you're not going to be enlightened if you don't follow our path to the one God. Let me ask again, where are the rules of God? There are none. Just as the earth was formed in perfectness and love, just as the creation of the human being and the seed from the stars, so beautiful, just like then where there were no rules, today there are no rules. The construct of the oneness is ruleless. There is only one way, truly, to understand what I'm telling you. And that is the I am. When you realize that you are part of the cosmos and always were, this differs from the land you sit in. And in all respect, I give you a new concept of nirvana. In this place, nirvana is the description of you not having to return anymore to live lives. Supposedly you would be finished and never come back. We have given you information that is beautiful. There is nirvana, and you've always strived toward it. Now let me describe it. Old soul, it's with you living lifetime after lifetime and finally having this planet achieve a shift of consciousness so that when you return in nirvana, it will be to a new earth with new energy, that you will have light you never had before. That is the goal, and always was. It's the same scenario that the Pleiadians had from the 9 stars they came from. Dear ones, you are sitting in a special time. Where are the rules of God? Love has no structure. Do you love someone? Prove it. Write it down. Show that which is the structure of love. There are no rules to love. It just is. And that is the relationship of you to you, you to earth, you to each other. And that is the oneness. That's what is taught in this land and many other places on the planet. My partner described what brought him to his knees in a place that was called Christian, where he first felt the love of the Master. There were rules for him then, but now he understands that love has no beginning or end, and that the masters of this planet who became prophets told you so over and over. And yet humans want to worship humans. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as you keep the focus on the love of the Creator. The tree is big. There is one trunk. Many branches all talk to one another from the same source. And we've given you this example before. Eventually, the planet will allow all of the branches to exist in their own way and celebrate them and bless them And you will have many with rules, all coming together, letting the others exist, because it will no longer be exclusionary. It'll be one. Namaste. And so it is. Greetings, dear ones. I'm Kryon of Magnetic Service. The group finds itself in Nepal, in Kathmandu, in a lovely monastery where there are hundreds of nuns. And before we continue with a message that may seem odd here, we wish to pause and have anyone listening honor those who were lost in the 2015 earthquake. For right where we are, the earth shook. And in this city there was great loss, both in history and in lives. Great fear, and it imprints the planet in a way that you have to clear it. And yet there is no better place for clearing than where it happened. And so just take a moment and think and honor those who literally were lost when the earth rumbled so much. Some will ask, how is it that your partner Gaia could do such a thing? And if you ask those who are here, in their sorrow, they will say the oneness of all is a circle. And things come and go appropriately, and they return. And the circle always improves itself through wisdom. And many can look back, and even through the grief, they can smile with the joy of understanding that God is good, and that those lost may even be back. It's a beautiful situation and understanding and belief that compassion creates, especially when so much of the public here truly understands it. I want to talk about something that seems strange as we sit here in Nepal. But Nepal is the home of Mount Everest. Mount Everest is the tallest mountain on the planet. But it wasn't always. Because tomorrow there's going to be an air tour of the mountains, of the Everest area and the Himalayas, I wish to present something today, because many of you will look upon the mountains and wonder how those could survive, even those climbing, of the cold and especially no oxygen. There is something about the mountain that would remind you then of Lemuria. And that's what I want to speak of. I would like to fill in some blanks that I have not spoken of before on how a mountain higher than Mount Everest could sustain any life at the top. And it did. So let me review with you the story of Mu. The small continent in the middle of the Pacific was really one mountain. The planet has volcanic hotspots. Right now, there are about 13 of them. And they are famous because the magma from the center of the Earth is very close to the surface. This creates volcanic activity constantly and continuously. And what you call today as Hawaii is simply one giant mountain that was pushed up out of the ocean through not tectonic activity, but through a hot spot that created a bulge underneath the mantle, pushing the land up like a giant bubble filled with magma around Hawaii. The largest mountain in the world is still Hawaii, measured from the bottom of the ocean to its top. It sticks out of the ocean even today, thousands of feet. It's an enormous mountain. But when it was pushed up, it was almost 28,000 feet high. This process is not seen or acknowledged to have happened by geologists. And yet the precedent has been set in what you call Yellowstone. For today, Yellowstone is flat. But at what time? One time, it was very high, high enough that glaciers formed. And Yellowstone is a hot spot. And it had the same exact situation, where a bubble of magma pushed from below, creating mountains where today there are flatlands. Eventually, the bubble diminishes over thousands of years. Lemuria, the mountain of Hawaii, was up very high when humanity was seeded. Dear ones, I want to talk about what happened there. For we've told you that on Lemuria, before it sunk to what you call the Hawaiian Islands and receded when the magma started to go down, there was something very special there. It was almost the seeds of karmic attributes, the beginning human civilization. And from Lemuria, all manner of reincarnation occurred all over the planet. There were many reincarnated from Lemuria to India, and Nepal, Tibet, and the area you call Pakistan and China. There were no borders back then, so it was a regional incarnation. Doesn't it make sense that those who received some of the original seed information about oneness would then come to this area to continue in that reincarnation scheme and system of beauty and oneness? Indeed. But what I want to tell you today has to do with the mountain itself. Some things that I have never filled in for you. When you see Everest, it is known for something: ferocious weather. Weather that changes dramatically from hour to hour, so that climbing the mountain is treacherous, and they have to be ready at any time to stay for days, simply waiting for weather. You might then practically apply this same attribute to a mountain that's 28,000 feet high in the middle of the Pacific. But you'd be wrong. For there was no ferocious weather around the mountain of Lemuria. The Himalayas and the place where they are create the weather. And in the middle of the Pacific, there was no then creation of strange weather simply because the mountain was there. In fact, there were very little winds, only the trade winds of the kinds that are today. So there was no ferocious weather. It was easily climbable without having weather an issue, but it was cold. It was cold simply because it's cold up high. And so we've told you at the top of this mountain called Lemuria, there was something called the Temple of Rejuvenation. Lemurians did not live on the mountain, they lived on the shores. They were smart. And so they were a tropical bunch, except for the few who climbed the mountain. And the temple of rejuvenation has been covered in what took place there and what happened there and the reasons for it. But some would say, how is it possible that in those days you could have anyone living at 28,000 feet? First of all, where did they get their heat? There's no real wood to burn, or you'd run out of it quickly. And where did they get their oxygen? You cannot live that high. So I'll tell you both things, one of them understandable and one of them not. First of all, remember, the island was volcanic. There simply was plenty of heat. It had a caldera. Also, lava continued to flow just like it does today, building new land. Even before this mountain began to subside slowly, it still was a volcano. So there were many steam vents. There was plenty of lava all of the time. There's the heat source. Now you understand why someone could live that high, perhaps even a small support community for the temple of rejuvenation. That's the heat. The oxygen, that is something that someday you will discover. How do I tell you this, dear ones? When the mountain came up, it exposed a great deal of ancient sediment. And in that sediment was a discovery. Rocks that actually stored and contained oxygen. They were easily spottable and mineable. Those rocks were taken up to the top, very slowly. But the problem was getting the oxygen out of the rocks. You had to melt the rocks. Now, where would you get a heat source to melt a rock? And the answer is right in front of you, called lava. And if you understand what I'm telling you, the rocks were melted in a confined area, releasing oxygen. Is it a difficult thing for you to imagine something you haven't seen yet, where formations on the planet actually would trap oxygen before they solidified? That is how they got their oxygen at the top of the mountain. There will be science someday who will come along and discover this, and then you will know that there is validity in what I tell you. So Lemuria was different than you might think. No ferocious weather around a mountain even higher than Everest. Plenty of snow, fire and ice, and a beautiful temple of rejuvenation that took its oxygen from the land. I tell you this because you're in a place with the highest mountain on earth at the moment. We finished the story, of course. When Lemuria began to subside very slowly, lives were not lost. There was no destruction. It took a long time. But there was great fear that it would subside right into the ocean. Therefore, many took to their boats, their canoes, and the rest is history. Even those who settled on Easter Island know that their ancestors came from the north, from Hawaii. So, dear ones, it fills out the story that we have never told you before. And what better place to tell you about some of the precious beginnings of that which is the Akash, than in this place that celebrates it, knows about it. The ancients who were here were Lemurian. And so it is.